So my name is Alex, and I'm the program director with Diabetes Hope Foundation, and I will be your host for this evening. So as many of you know, Diabetes Hope Foundation is a Canadian nonprofit where we focus on supporting transitioning youth living with diabetes. We want to thank you all for joining us tonight for the next hour for tonight's webinar with our 3 elite alumni athletes, Ali, Kevin, and Scotia, to talk about sports and athletics between football, skiing, weightlifting, probably some more. You never know what's going to come up, for a really fun conversation that will be quite the runaround. Yes, pun intended. But do you remember when you were in high school, the excitement, the thrill, the adrenaline that you felt being on a sports team? What sport did you choose? And we're going to find that out from our alumni here tonight. But do you remember dreaming about one day where you never knew where sports was going to take you? And again, we're going to see where sports took our 3 alumni athletes tonight. We're just going to have a really fun chat about sports and where they are today. But I do want to mention that tonight our athletes will be talking about their diabetes and sports. So all their personal experiences that they share tonight, please do not take them as professional experiences and professional input. Please refer to your professional and your healthcare team if you have any specific questions. So without further ado, we want to jump right into tonight because we have a lot of things to cover and a lot of exciting things to discuss. So lace up your cleats, get your jersey, like I have mine, might not be on, but that's okay. Strap on your helmets, and we're going to be hearing from our alumni tonight. So let's begin with a few introductions. So thank you all for joining us. And Ali, let's start with your introduction.
Oh, I'm first. Oh, pressure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Ali. I'm from Ottawa. I received my scholarship from the Diabetes Hope Foundation in 2013. I have cystic fibrosis-related diabetes. So this diagnosis was the impact of my lung disorder that affected other organs in my body. I graduated from Carleton University with a bachelor's in communications and psychology, and recently from Algonquin College with a diploma in brand management. When I was in high school, I was a competitive cross-country runner all the way through. And when I got to university, I got a job at the gym at Carleton and transitioned more into weightlifting and strength training, and competed in powerlifting and strongman. And now I am a very proud member of a CrossFit gym, CrossFit 1855, and that's where I am today.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like that you've had a lot of different sports changes and athletic changes, so we're excited to hear about those. So Kevin, let's jump to you next.
Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be here to speak with everybody tonight. In terms of my kind of introduction, I received the Senator Norm Atkins scholarship in 2013, just like Ali, so we are similar, going back quite a ways now. My diagnosis came when I was in grade 8, so typical kind of like juvenile onset diabetes, and it really kind of shocked myself and my family because nobody kind of on either side, my mom's side or my dad's side, had diabetes, so it was something new to our family and quite an adjustment, but I think we've done pretty well so far as a family and personally as well. Sports has always been a big part of my life. Growing up, I was a hockey player and then transitioned into football throughout high school. And then I ended up playing football in university. I went to the University of Toronto and finished there in 2016. Since then, I've worked professionally in sports in both hockey and football, but I've moved into the hospitality industry now, and I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying it. The people I work with are amazing, and the guests that I get to interact with on a daily basis are phenomenal. How I stay involved in sports now is I referee football. So I referee everybody from kind of little kids football to high school, university, and I'm involved with the CFL as well. So still involved in sport, but it definitely looks a little bit different than what it has in the past.
Very different than how you started. So again, I'm really looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into that and hearing about your changes. So last but not least, Scotia.
Hey everybody, my name is Scotia. I received my scholarship back in 2015. Last April, I graduated from Trent University with my bachelor's in conservation biology. This past year, I've taken a bit of a gap year living out in Fernie, BC and learning how to ski. It was really awesome. This fall, I'm returning to school in Nanaimo to study fisheries and aquaculture. Growing up, I was a competitive triathlete. I really love endurance sports. I switched to competitive swimming later in my high school career. When I got to university, they didn't have a swim team or a triathlon team. I tried out for the novice rowing team, which I did in my first year. Second year, I made it onto the junior varsity team, and I fell in love with the sport of rowing. Now that I'm graduated, I've dabbled in skiing. I dabbled in whitewater kayaking this summer. I just love being outdoors, so any sport that happens in the outdoors, I'm really keen to learn more about. So that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Like I said, everybody here tonight has very different experiences with their athletics and what sport they chose. So with that being said, I'm going to dive into the first question. And you touched on it a little bit, but when did you first start sports, whether it was in public school when you were really little? When did you first start, and what was the first sport that you chose? So Kevin, I'm going to start with you on that one.
To be honest, sports have been a huge part of my life from kind of the get-go. Both my parents, my mom and my dad, have certainly always been athletic. I think my mom was a really strong basketball player. My dad enjoyed hockey. So it was kind of in my blood to always be involved in sport. So I think my first sport was probably like Timbit soccer back in the day at like 2 or 3 years old. And I think my favorite number, which is the jersey on the wall, number 3, was my first jersey number, because that's how old I was when I started playing. So that's a little bit of a fun memory to look back on, and a touch to childhood, even as I played at a lot older ages. But that was my first sport, was soccer back in the day, and I think I was probably 2 or 3 years old.
Oh, I love that. I think everybody's always kind of grown up with their favorite number. For me, I've got a jersey in the back, and mine's 11. It was my dad's hockey and baseball number. So that's kind of where I fell in love with that number. So it's kind of cool how that always turns out. Scotia, I'm going to jump to you now.
All right, so I also did Timbit soccer. I was not very good at soccer. In grade 6, I joined the cross-country running team in my middle school. My coach complimented me on my running, which really meant a lot to me. So I joined the local triathlon club here in Hamilton, which I trained for, for a number of years. I figured out that I loved swimming the most, so I switched to swimming near the end of my high school career. So I've started sports when I was pretty young, kind of got better at them when I was in grade 6, and really fell in love with it from there. So middle school, really.
Awesome. Yeah, so a lot of jumping around, and we'll talk about your high school in a minute too. But Allie, when did you first start?
Because like the other two here, I was a Timbit soccer player as well for a few years. But after soccer, I transitioned to gymnastics, and I did gymnastics as a kid for a few years. So I same would have been 5, 6, 7, 8, kind of around there, doing all those things. And then my first kind of real team was in 7th grade when I was on the cross-country running team at my high school.
Awesome. So I love how all 3 of you were Timbit soccer players. I was not, so I'm the odd one out on this one, but that's awesome to hear. So another reason why we're all here is diabetes related. So I want to move to a diabetes related question. In regards to your sports, did you find it difficult to manage your diabetes? And how in general did you manage your diabetes with switching back and forth to different athletics? Scotia, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Okay. So as we all know, managing diabetes can be very challenging, especially when you add in physical activity. My sports, triathlon and rowing, are very high intensity, long duration races. So managing my diabetes for those can be challenging. The thing I've learned is always be prepared. For triathlon, for example, I would always carry a goo gel. I don't know if you guys have ever had one of those. They're not the tastiest things in the world, but they're small, right? They're small, they're packed with energy, and they were there for me if I had a low during a race in triathlon. I just tucked them into my tri-suit. For rowing, there's always the coxie at the front of the boat, so I'd give them my glucometer and any low supplies if I was to need it. So yeah, what I learned most is just to always be prepared. In a funny way, managing diabetes during a race or practice can even be almost easier because it's predictable, for my sports anyway. It's like a set distance, kind of a set time-ish. So you know exactly the time period and the activity that you need to be planning for.
Great advice. And I think a lot of people can use those tips as well to be extra prepared. Allie, how about you?
Sure. So my two sports of weightlifting and running, I think I manage my diabetes a little bit differently for both of them. For the cross country running, similar to Scotia, it was longer, it was more endurance based. And truthfully, I didn't carry anything with me when I ran in races. I would always make sure to eat before, and I would, if I can remember correctly, it was a while ago, I drank an apple juice before I run, to kind of make my blood sugar a little bit higher, because I know I'm just going to burn it off in the next hour or so. And then in terms of strength training and that kind of thing, I find that it spikes my blood sugar more, and I have a lot more adrenaline happening, which also leads to my blood sugar spike. So what I've learned around training and strength is similar to Scotia, being extra prepared, making sure I am eating enough before going into a workout or a competition with an empty stomach is just not going to fly. I know I'm not going to perform well. As well, checking my blood sugar more, I guess, than a regular day would be different, even if I'm not acting on it, even if I'm not taking insulin for it or drinking a juice box, just kind of knowing like mentally where I'm at heading into a workout or an event is really important as well. And then since my blood sugar kind of spikes, I have to be able to manage those crashes that come after and kind of minimizing the effects of them. So making sure after an event, I'm also eating enough protein to keep everything a little bit more level and balanced after it just did a little hiccup there.
That's really good advice as well. So it sounds like that you've really learned a lot managing your diabetes through sports, which is really good. And Kevin.
Yeah, I think I would absolutely echo both of kind of the highs and lows that Scotia and Allie both touched upon, kind of pun intended in that regard. But I think with regards to my specific experiences, I think the level of sport as it got higher, the demands and like the forgiveness were less. So typically with regards to football, practice, I might go in a little bit higher because there is going to be a lot more running. It's kind of going to be like a lot more labor intensive. You know, you're running for the 2 hours nonstop versus a game, which is kind of on and off, on and off, on and off, and very repetitive. And there's, you know, the opportunity to take a break, check your glucose level, fix it if you need to fix it, whether you're going high or low. So practice, I would typically go in a little bit higher, and there is some room for forgiveness there, both with, you know, your actual level, but also with kind of the environment that you're in. With regards to a game day, that became certainly much more tougher of a juggling act. I felt that my performance level was optimal around a certain kind of level. And if I was even, you know, an 8 versus a 7, I felt that my performance suffered on game day. So it certainly was like a really kind of tough juggling act to make sure that I was at that optimal level so that I was able to perform and put my best foot forward, but also support my teammates, my coaches, and everybody that was, you know, giving their time and their effort as well. Because as much as this is at times a little bit of a handicap, you certainly don't want to use that as an excuse, and you want to be the best that you can be. So I think on game days, it definitely was a lot more strenuous and a lot more, I don't know, just tougher to juggle, but it was worth it in the end because it taught you so many different things that, you know, put you up, leg up on the competition.
And again, Kevin, you mentioned that it's really taught you a lot of things. Now, at the beginning there, you kind of touched upon how your management kind of changed when your competitive level increased. So that leads me to my next question. How did your sports increase with competitiveness, or did they increase? And how did you manage your diabetes around the increase in competitiveness? So Allie, I'm going to start with you on that question.
Sure. In terms of my grade 7 and 8 cross country versus my varsity high school cross country, I would say for me, I was a competitive person, since I do have cystic fibrosis as well. It's quite a not a knock against me, but you know, you have to work extra hard to be competitive at that level. But I would say just kind of like general varsity level, it increased through high school. And in terms of like strength training post that, I would say I'm very much a beginner and not quite elite status, and haven't really increased that kind of competitive side in my strength sports yet. But I would say personally, as a goal, I do try to up the competitiveness. And I guess, like I mentioned before, in terms of diabetes management, it's, you know, it's taking care of myself the same way doesn't exactly change whether I'm more competitive or competing at a higher level. I know that to perform my best, I have to make sure all those checks and balances are in place to have a good game day or competition, regardless of what level I've competed at. But I'm sure Scotia and Kevin can speak more too about more elite level management.
Exactly. So Scotia, we'll move to you now for that question.
All right. So one thing we all know is as competitive level, the competitive level of the sport increases, so does the time commitment. That's one thing I really struggled with, especially in university, but also in high school. Managing schoolwork, sports, and diabetes on top of that can be a lot, as I'm sure you guys are also familiar with. So that obviously impacts stress levels too, which also can impact my blood sugar. So that was definitely something that I had to deal with. Again, I know I'm coming back to the same point, but planning was really what helped me. Longer practices too also happen with a higher competitive level. So again, making sure you're always prepared. If you have a low, just making sure you're always organized. That's been a really big part of my life, because balancing all these things along with diabetes, yeah, just really learning to be organized.
Keeping organized is very important, especially with sports and time management and being within different levels of schools, like you said, high school and then college, university. So sounds like maybe there were a few hiccups, and we'll dive maybe a little bit more into those. But for now, Kevin, we'll jump to you.
I think diabetes kind of, it forces you to be independent very early on, no matter what age that you're diagnosed. And that certainly was the same for me in relation to sports. You know, I was the one that was responsible for everything. I knew how I felt. I knew that I needed to test my blood. I knew that I needed to either take more insulin or more juice or this or that to kind of combat any situation that was presented to me. And when I was kind of starting out as a new diabetic and kind of, you know, recreational sports, there wasn't the help that was nearby. So it was solely on me, and I had to kind of adjust to that. And I think that in a way that was a positive thing. But as I progressed into more competitive sports, there certainly became resources available that I needed to take advantage of. And I was very apprehensive about that initially. You know, I know myself the best. I don't need you helping me. I don't need somebody else telling me what to do. But when you step back and you look at the grand scheme of things, there are so many resources out there, so many technological advances that have come forward in the last number of years that can really help. And if you're open to seeking help from those devices, but also help from other people that may be more knowledgeable, it can really take you from, you know, managing your diabetes to like killing your diabetes and like being on top of it. So I think when I started playing in university, it was a little bit of a transition for me, because all of a sudden I had team doctors and physios and training staff that, looking back on, I owe a lot to, because they were always there. As soon as I came off the field, it was like, Kevin, come sit down, test your blood. Okay, fine, I'll take a second. Whereas, you know, the internal me was just like raring to go, and that competitive spirit was like, no, I'm fine, I don't need it. It's like, no, Kevin, come sit down, take a break. We know how bad you want to be on the field, but it's important to make sure that when you are out there, you're at your perfect level. So I think it took a little bit of a transition as the level of sport increased. My trust and willingness to kind of go to resources and you know, seek help and things like that, just, it allowed me to be a better athlete in the long run.
And it's really good that you had those resources available to you and that you had the team behind you. So it leads me to my next question. How did you disclose your diabetes to your teammates and to your coaches as well? And how did they react to that? So Scotia, I'm going to start with you.
All right. So when I was younger, I didn't always tell people I had diabetes right away, including my coaches, which in retrospect, I realized was not the smartest decision. I think originally I was worried that it would make them see me differently. However, as I've grown older and I've realized that, hey, whenever I tell someone I have diabetes, they don't react poorly. Like I've never had someone react poorly to me telling them that, which is really awesome. So as I've, grown through sports, I've always made a point of telling my coach, hey, I have diabetes, just so you know, just in case something were to go wrong, like I was to get a low, just so they know, and they know that they can support me and give me resources if I need them. So keeping that communication open is super important, which took me a little while to realize, but I'm here now and I'm really glad about it.
Good. Really glad to hear that. Kevin, I'm going to jump to you because I know, Allie, you have a little bit different of a perspective with that. So I want to give you the chance to explain, but Kevin, we'll hear from you now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would share kind of two stories. The day I was diagnosed, I actually had a hockey practice that night. And my first question that I asked, it was actually the founder of the Charles H. Best Diabetes Center in Whitby that came out to kind of give me my diagnosis. Marlene, I asked her, I said, can I go to practice tonight? And she said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. But I ended up going to practice. I got the okay to go and just tell my team that I was going to have to take a couple weeks off until I could figure out what was going on and whatnot. And I think that was the first opportunity that I had to kind of really sit down and just be like, okay, I don't know everything about that. That's the most important thing, is because people are always receptive to things, but usually what they are less receptive to is something that they don't know. So if you're open and honest and able to explain, what the condition is, how you manage it, what support you need from them as, teammates or coaches, I think everybody's on point once they are knowledgeable about it. And the second story that I would kind of share is with regards to my teammates versus coaches. Teammates were always supportive. I never had any incidences, thank goodness, that there was ever any bullying or anything like that. My teammates were always on point, and they became a resource as well. They could see when I was struggling and say, you know what, take a break, take a sec, you're going to be okay. And it's just one of those hurdles that we all have to go through that are, a little bit different for you, but certainly, we're not thinking any less of you for that. However, what I noticed, kind of going back to your last question as well, with the competitive level of sport rising, I think when you manage your diabetes well, people expect that, and they expect it all the time. And that's one thing that I had a tough time with my coaches, is that if I ever did have a low during a game, it was like, what the heck are you doing? Why can't you be out on the field? Why do you have to take a break? And I think that it kind of just awoke me a little bit to different situations. And these people have a job and they have money and things like that. And it just forced me to kind of take a step back and say, you know what, they're not looking at you differently because of your condition or your diagnosis, but they've got stressors on them as well. And but I never had any issues with teammates and things like that. And like I said before, just being open with everybody, it always was a positive thing from that.
And that's really good that you were open with your teammates and that they were also a good resource for you. So Allie, you're next.
Sure. In terms of my perspective on kind of giving out that information and having other people help manage my care, like my coaches, the sports I've competed in, cross country, strongman, powerlifting, and CrossFit are all individual sports. I'm not out there with a team supporting me. I'm out there against everybody else. So my management is completely on me at that point. My coaches that I have now are, when I met them, full transparency. I'm diabetic, I have these issues, and they are all knowledgeable and have a lot of experience, and they're great. And they do their best to check up on me when I'm maybe like acting a little different, or my face is kind of pale. They're like, "Are you okay? Like, do you want a banana? Are you sure you're good?" So they do check up and ask, which is really lovely. But for the most part, I would say that I really don't rely on anyone except myself to be able to keep in balance, which brings its own set of challenges.
I can imagine, but it seems to have made you a lot more, a lot stronger. So kudos to you for being able to do that by yourself and still having that support available to you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about you individually. So, Scotia, I know that you do skiing and that you took a gap year and that you were skiing. So, when you did that, did you do it competitively? Were you just doing it for fun? And when you were skiing, how were you managing your diabetes?
Good question. Okay, so I've never skied before this year, and I did not do it competitively. It was purely for fun, just to take a year off of school, because I realized my whole life I've been in school from kindergarten to graduating university. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break, have a little adventure. So moved out to Fernie, BC. Beautiful area. If you ever have a chance to go, I would highly recommend it. So yeah, I learned how to ski. The first day I cried on the green run because I was so scared. But I ended up making it down a couple black diamonds by the end of the season. So it was awesome. I had a lot of great folks out there who I know from my summer job who really helped, and it was awesome. So managing diabetes while skiing, that was a new challenge for me because I've never really been into winter sports at all. So the temperature fluctuations come with a whole new set of challenges. One of which I was always a bit worried. I use an insulin pen, so I was always a bit worried about it getting too cold, just worried about its temperature. So I would keep it in a little pocket in my ski jacket, like close to my body, to make sure it wasn't like getting exposed to too much ice and stuff like that. The cold also kind of wreaks havoc on my blood sugar. It makes it go low a lot, especially since I'm out there working while skiing. Cold temperature, low blood sugar quite easily. So I always made sure to pack low supplies in my pockets of my ski jacket. That's a good thing about ski jacket is it's really big, lots of pockets, lots of room for snacks. I also have a Freestyle Libre, which is really handy on the hills because I can use my phone to scan it and it actually goes through all the layers of clothing, which is awesome. I didn't have to like delayer to check my blood sugar, and I could do it on the chairlift. Easy swipe. So yeah, I figured out a few systems to make skiing optimal, and yeah, it was awesome. It worked out quite well.
That's really awesome to hear. And I definitely love ski jackets as well with the amount of pockets. So I can only imagine the amount of snacks that you could have packed for a full day. I think probably would have seemed a little bit more puffy because of all your snacks.
Maybe a little.
That's great. And Ali, I know that you've done quite a few different sports and you've jumped around, but I'm really interested to know about the gymnastics. So when you were doing gymnastics younger, how did you manage your diabetes in that sense? And why did you stop doing gymnastics if you stopped?
So at that point, I wasn't diagnosed with diabetes when I was doing gymnastics.
Oh.
So, yeah. So.
Okay.
My diagnosis came later. About 12.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, were you diagnosed when you were cross country running?
Yep.
Let's talk about that then, because I still want to hear from you and how you managed that, and if you were doing long endurance runs, and how you manage your diabetes with that.
Sure. So I started cross country running in 7th grade, and I was diagnosed with diabetes in 8th grade. So it was kind of right at the beginning of my career where I had to learn how to manage it moving forward. At that time, I was on insulin pens, and I was checking my fingers. So just thinking way back here. It definitely included a lot of like extra eating, things like that. Making sure I was checking before and after a race right away to figure out kind of where I was, and really honestly having a good diet to be able to balance it where I needed to.
Yeah. Did you notice a big difference from when you first started running, not having diabetes, and then being diagnosed while running? Like not while running, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think so, or nothing's really sticking out in my mind from that age. Obviously, since I was so young and it was a new diagnosis, there was a lot more concern surrounding how I am at track meets and things like that from my family especially. But there was never any issues, and thankfully I usually always had someone from my family come to watch me, so there was always that extra cushion of support in case I needed it.
That's really great to hear. And it's really nice that nothing stopped you from continuing to run, not even your diabetes when you still were running. So that's awesome. Kevin, and so I know that you talked a little bit about refereeing when it comes to the little kids and then even moving up into university and the CFL. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you manage your diabetes while refereeing, even at the different levels that you referee at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest transition was with regards to playing football to refereeing football was a referee doesn't get a break during a game. They have to be on for every single play, right? And I think that may seem obvious to some, but I had been in the habit as a player of, you go out and you play 5 or 6 plays and, you're 100% effort, but then you come off the field and you're off the field for, as long as maybe 10, 15 minutes before you end up going back on. But a referee doesn't get those opportunities to take a break, to stop, to relax, to go sit on the bench, drink some juice or Powerade or whatever they need. So it kind of just became a little bit of a different game. And obviously you're not working as hard physically. So it just was a different challenge in terms of figuring out what level was the optimal level to sit at, how strenuous was the activity going to be? Like, did I have to account for adrenaline? Did I have to account for, working out in essence? Even though a referee isn't doing the same running that a player's doing, they still have to be on the ball. They still have to be ready to move and be in position. So I think it was just a little bit of a transition from going, having the opportunity to take a break versus being on all the time. The other big thing transition-wise kind of from the two was that when I played football, as you may have noticed, the pants and the equipment are very tight, and there's not a lot of opportunity to hide your pump. I wear a pump. So I would actually typically like take it off when I went on the field. So I would have it clipped on, and then as soon as I was going on the field, I would declip, toss it to my trainer, and she would be holding it until I came off the field. As soon as I came off, I would test my blood, click it back in, and do what I need to do. But as a referee, I don't have to worry about physical contact, even though it still may happen. The likelihood is far less. So I wear my pump now during the course of a whole game, which obviously is a little bit of a different juggling act as well. So there was a couple different transitions in terms of going from player to referee, but everything has seemed to work out pretty well. And with regards to different game levels, from kind of little kids up to, the older kids in the more competitive games, I think the biggest thing is adrenaline. When you go out to do a little kids game, you never want to mess up, but there isn't, the expectation of being 100%. There's a little bit of forgiveness. But when you're doing a big game, I did a game last year, a top prospects game or a championship game or something of that caliber where, people's potential jobs are on the line and things like that. You have to be perfect. And same as kind of playing, it can be a stressful situation, and you can, your adrenaline can rise, and you can all of a sudden be going high just purely based off of adrenaline because of the big competition. So kind of just recognizing that does change and kind of being aware of that is the biggest thing. But I guess those would kind of be like the different transition pieces that I've had to kind of challenge myself through.
I think it's really interesting also, Kevin, how when you are refereeing, there's different perspectives and expectations when you referee the different games. So that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing. So we've talked.
I think it's important to always be perfect, but obviously there's a little more forgiveness at certain levels.
Of course. And I remember when my brother used to play hockey and he was really little, they were all making snow angels on the ice, and compared to his bigger days where you're right, the stakes were a little bit higher. So I can only imagine refereeing football at the really young ages. So that'd be a lot of fun.
It's cute though.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about your sports, your athletics, how you started, but where are you now with your sports? Are you still where you started? What are you doing? Have you stopped? So yeah, what are you doing now with your sports? Allie, let's start with you.
Sure. I have a unique situation where my sports are vastly different and changed a lot over the past 10 or so years. 10 or so, maybe almost 15, I guess. And I admittedly do not run those long distances anymore. I don't. And my training has changed. So when I was powerlifting, my time commitment was probably 15 hours in the weight room, where now it looks kind of more like 5 or 6 a week, and it's more fun and as well. So that really kind of plays a factor there too. And honestly, during quarantine, things have been pretty tough to continue with training. There's only so many burpees and air squats you can do. But definitely still trying to maintain that and do what I can. I've made a little DIY squat rack out of cement and 2x4s. So I have that here, and luckily I do have enough gym equipment here at my parents' house to maintain where I can, and it's a fun challenge to be able to continue it in a little bit of a different capacity now.
That's really interesting, and congratulations for doing a complete DIY with cement and 2x4s, because it's something I would do. I'd ask my fiance to do that for me. So kudos to you for doing that and to staying fit during this time. So Kevin, how about you? Let's take the next question.
Yeah, I think sport is still a huge part of my life, but in terms of like the physical activity component, it has definitely changed drastically as I've kind of had to grow up and enter the workforce, which I'm not complaining about, but it certainly is a different, phase of my life. So going from kind of the university competitive sport environment, I was probably spending anywhere around 80 hours a week in the gym, on the field, just a combination of different things in order to stay fit. And that number has certainly decreased. But I still kind of seek the opportunity to try and challenge myself. And working out now has transitioned from kind of a must do to something that like I enjoy now. So before it was, very regimented. It was a program that was handed to you and you must do this and you must push yourself to that extreme. And, it certainly got the results, but it also came with, its own challenges in terms of your body being sore and always tired and that kind of thing. So now the opportunity is still there to work out, but to work out to the extent that I want. So I think, really focusing on how your body feels, being in touch with it, listening to it. Some days you might go out for a long run and some days you might just take the dog for a walk and that's going to be it. So it's definitely transitioned and been a little bit of a different juggling act in relation to that of diabetes and how you manage that and what your basal rates might be. The effects of highs and lows and things like that have certainly diminished. But yeah, it's just a different, chapter in my life, but obviously still important to be involved in sport and have that influence. So you try and hold on to it and make it fit into your schedule, but definitely not as strenuous as it once was.
That I can understand too. So Scotia, we'll jump to you, and then Kevin, you brought up a really good point that I want to talk about next. So Scotia, where are you now?
Yeah, so Ali and Kevin bring up really good point. Sports definitely change throughout your life depending on where you are. Back in middle school and high school, I fell in love with sports doing triathlon. Obviously, I've done many different sports since then. So now, obviously just spent a season skiing. I love to try out new sports, and that's something that, triathlon really taught me. It's the sport consisting of 3 sports in itself. So Maybe that kind of gave rise to my love of doing lots of different things and trying all sorts of different sports. So one of the things that I've realized since graduating university is there's not a lot of option for sports at that type of competitive level for people kind of our age, like mid-20s. I noticed like a lot of, for rowing, for example, there's the master's program, which is awesome. They're a bit above my age category, and then there's the university, which is a bit below my age category. So I'm working right now to try and incorporate sports into my active lifestyle in any way I can. As Kevin was saying, some days you go out for walks, other days you hit it hard in the gym. It really depends, especially during this really weird time. So yeah, sports have just taught me to incorporate activity into my everyday life, which I find super valuable.
And that is really valuable to really stay active. I know it's been hard during this time. So actually all three of you have touched upon what it's like to still continue to be active and continue to do your sports during COVID and I guess it being in quarantine. So has that changed the sports that you're doing? Do you think it's going to change in the future? What do you think it's going to kind of look like, and where are you now with that? So Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so it's drastically changed. My go-to things to watch on TV were sports. So I've certainly been with withdrawal in terms of, opportunities to watch things on TV, whether it's hockey or football or basketball, but also in kind of regular life and things that I'm involved in. And obviously being in a team sport environment, it has been a very kind of just wake up call to what a huge part of your life that sport plays. You can't go out and toss a football with yourself, right? It's tough to do. I've tried and I've failed. And it's even tougher to ref a game when there's nobody to play. So it's definitely been a wake up call, and it kind of just makes you appreciate everything that you have more so, when everything was normal or gets back to normal. But fingers crossed that things kind of can return sooner rather than later. But you also know that the world is never going to be the same place that it was. And you know what? It's an opportunity for people to think differently and challenge each other and things like that. So I don't know what it will look like, but sports has definitely been a huge part of my life, and I would hope that when everything kind of settles, that sports is still there and is still able to be fundamentally important to everybody that has once enjoyed it, and also those who haven't yet.
I completely agree with you on that one. I really hope that they come back, and honestly, I hope they come back bigger and better if that's possible, because I'm also a huge sports fan when it comes to watching, not so much playing, but that's okay. So Ali, how about you? You've already talked about a little bit of what you've done in quarantine with building your squat rack, which is super cool. Is there anything else that you've done to stay active and athletic during quarantine? Oh, nope, we lost Ali for a second. Scotia, that's okay. Ali, did you hear my question?
I a little bit. Do you mind repeating it?
No worries. So you've already done your squat rack during quarantine, but is there anything else that you're doing differently? And what do you think that your sport, like powerlifting and weightlifting, is going to look like when everything comes back?
Very interesting. So I have amazing coaches that lent out a lot of their equipment from a CrossFit gym for the members to be able to take when we shut down a few months ago. So I do have like enough equipment here to like have good workouts and things like that. But truthfully, it's really difficult to get into that headspace when I'm alone, which is kind of ironic because it's more of an individual sport, but the community is a big part of what motivates me to go and strive to be a better athlete. So I would say everything's a little bit slower paced. I'm definitely not training at the intensity that I was, or I think that I'm capable of, and coming back into it when everything kind of the dust settles and everything goes back to normal. I'm definitely more aware of myself and my management, and slowing down has really helped with being able to get everything a little bit more on track. and I think I'll be even more motivated to jump into competitions and be more competitive, because I haven't been dialed in for quite a while. So I think the motivation will be there, kind of when everything comes back to.
Oh, we lost Allie again. Poor connection. So we'll just wait for her to jump back. But Scotia, if you want to take, oh, and Allie's back again. Don't we just love the internet?
Yes, I'm very much. So it motivates me to come back and smash bigger and better goals. Is what it's
Awesome. Well, it's great that you have those big goals to set, and hopefully you don't have to buy your equipment after, because you're going to love having it around so much. So hopefully that's not a big expense for you. I know. So Scotia, let's do you next. And so what are you thinking with your sports and during quarantine, and what have you done?
I really can relate to Allie about being motivated by other people. If there's one thing that this quarantine has really hammered home for me, is that I love being around other people. I find having a team super, super important when it comes to sports. Even when I was doing triathlon, obviously it's an individual sport when you're competing. However, training with a team is super valuable. As we're all competitive people, being at a practice with other people makes you want to go faster, and that's one good thing. Also, you're just always there to, raise each other up, cheer each other on, which we don't have right now, unfortunately. So that's been a bit of a challenge. However, quarantine has given me the opportunity to try different sorts of things. Like, I've been doing a lot more yoga at home, which I really, really like. It really helps me practice my mindfulness and kind of, get in more of a positive headspace. There's a lot of YouTube videos on that, which is great. As for sports, after quarantine, both triathlon and rowing, the two main ones I've done, both rely on big race days. So going to a race for a triathlon, there's a ton of people there. There's all different categories. So it's a big crowd, same with rowing regattas. So there's crowds, which might be difficult to navigate in the future. So I don't really know what that's going to look like. Probably more stringent measures about having smaller crowds, maybe different pockets to compete in. I'm not really sure, but it'll be different for sure. And I'm interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, especially with the crowds, and who knows, you're right, if they'll have different sections or pods. So that's, yeah, I don't know how that's going to go, and I'm really interested to see how that goes. Welcome back, Allie.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So we are kind of getting close to the end of our time, and I do want to talk a little bit about your influences. So, and Kevin, you kind of talked about this a little bit and having the resources available to you, but we all know that there's a lot of celebrities and people that especially have diabetes and that are in athletics, like Max Domi, for example. So did you guys look up to anyone particular in sports who had diabetes as you were growing up, changing sports? Who were your sports heroes, in a sense? So Kevin, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think for a long period of time, my role models with regards to sports were people that didn't have diabetes, but still kind of conducted themselves in a professional manner. You saw kind of the heart and soul that they poured into their sport. So the name that always jumps off the page for me is Sidney Crosby. Just kind of the ultimate professional, always doing the right thing, always, challenging himself and his teammates. But as I kind of progressed into taking sport a little more seriously, I did reach out to a former NFL and CFL football player, John Chick, who was type 1 diabetic as well. And I didn't really look up to him in terms of a football player, but more of somebody that had diabetes and had succeeded in sports. And that was something that, I needed as a role model. We didn't play the same position. He was quite a bit older than me and things like that. But certainly by way of emails and whatnot, he was able to kind of just provide some insight and some encouragement to keep going and whatnot. So I guess Sidney Crosby would be like my kind of sport icon, and then John Chick would be somebody that was type 1 diabetic that I certainly looked up to, and kind of, you know, was able to bounce a couple questions off of as I kind of really took sports seriously. So those were kind of two names that I always thought of as an athlete growing up.
That's really interesting that you were able to reach out to someone who you looked up to and you were able to bounce those questions off of. So that's really interesting. So for those of you who are watching, maybe try and do that, and you never know, somebody might reach out. So Ali, let's jump to you. Your connection looks good. So
hopefully. I would say same boat as Kevin. I didn't really, especially when I was running, I didn't really look up necessarily to anyone. I was really kind of like, look what I can do. And I didn't really kind of externalize a lot at that point. But a few years ago, there's an athlete who came on my radar. She's Canadian. She's from Saskatchewan. Her name's Jessica Buettner, and she's a world-class powerlifter, also a type 1 diabetic. So she's like, I don't know, super cool. I follow her on Instagram and like follow her, whatever she does. She's so cool. And she is really open. She's a pharmacist as well. So she's really intelligent, and she is really open with her type 1 diabetes struggles, and kind of documents when she has highs and lows, and talks about what it means and how her training went, and the impacts of that around her sport. So that's really interesting and motivating as well for me to kind of continually monitor and see if I see similar trends and things like that. I would say she's I really look up to, and she's a good Canadian girl, which is a bonus.
That is a bonus, having her be Canadian, and I hope one day maybe you get to meet her and maybe do a lifting training session. I don't know what they're called, but a training session. Sure. That would be really cool. Keep us posted if you do. So Scotia, who do you look up to, and who's your sport/diabetes hero?
All right, so back when I was competing in triathlon, I really looked up to Simon Whitfield. Amazing triathlete, of course. I actually got the chance to meet him once. He came to Hamilton. That was awesome for little 13-year-old me. I was so excited. Later training in triathlon, I was actually coached by Lionel Sanders, who is now very high up in the triathlon world on the Ironman circuit. So that's really awesome. I looked up to him when he was coaching me, but now even more so to see where he is now. I'm so happy and proud to be coached by him. As for diabetic athletes in particular, I don't have a specific example, but whenever I meet someone else who is an athlete and a diabetic, I automatically look up to them because, of course, we're great. Because we understand the struggle that comes with managing diabetes with sports. So whenever I see another athlete, it makes me really happy. And I think we're all inspirations, and I'm so glad to have met you guys. I look up to you too.
This is why we love doing stuff like this, and it gives everybody a chance to connect. So for those other athletes who are watching tonight, feel free to reach back out to us to be able to get you in contact with these three lovely athletes. I'm sure that they could give you even more tips and tricks and even stories that they've been through. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. So again, we are just getting to the end. So I want to leave it to you guys to share your last final words, whether you have some advice, some tips, just a few quick little snippets to give to our audience watching. So Scotia, I'm going to start with you on that one.
What I want everyone to realize, and everyone knows this, I'm sure, is diabetes cannot stop us from doing anything. I think sports is something that really, really helps teach us that, because a lot of people expect diabetics to have a lot of trouble managing their diabetes when competing in sports. And I love it whenever we can just, excel at whatever sport we're doing while being diabetic at the same time. It's just really empowering, and I love how it shows other people that yes, even though we do have diabetes, we can still do all these things just as well as anyone else without diabetes.
Exactly. You nailed that one. Allie, how about you? Some last words?
Sure, totally. I think kind of echoing that, if, diabetes as an athlete sounds like a huge, incredible feat. And, sometimes it is. And I think that it really adds to our resiliency, and it helps with, our motivation to be good athletes, to be able to, more or less keep up with everybody else. And I think a big part of that is a big part of all of this is reaching our community, especially. So I was talking with Scotia earlier, and I'm still pretty close with several of the people I won my scholarship with in 2013, and we've been there for the past 7 years, talking to each other. Oh, did you try this? Oh, how are you liking this? Are you how's this going? And having that community so incredible, and it's very much eye-opening and heartwarming to be able to have that to fall back on.
Completely agree. And I'm sure all the others that you've connected with will also agree with you. And last but not least, Kevin.
Yeah, I would echo what both of the previous two ladies said. I think that, resiliency is huge, and then kind of just the ability to power through and show how great we are is so important. I think the words that I would kind of leave just as we wrap up is that nothing is bigger than your own health, though. And I think that there's been lots of opportunities where, I've pushed when I should have kind of drawn back and said, you know what, I need to check my blood, and I need to be on the ball versus just, powering through or something like that. So you never want to use diabetes as a crutch. You never want to use it as an excuse, but recognizing that it is a huge part of our lives, and it needs the attention that it deserves. And if you're on top of it, and if you're successful with it, and if you manage it well, and kind of do all the things that we've talked about over the course of this call, then sports can be nothing but fun. But it certainly deserves the attention that it needs. And I think that if you're able to do that, then, what Scotia and what Ali said, it won't hold you back by any means.
Yeah, you're completely right. All three of you nailed exactly everything on the head. You gave some great advice. And some last final words from here at DHF. We do have a Nothing Can Stop Me hockey book. Barbara's son Bobby actually wrote this book when he was 10 years old and first diagnosed with diabetes. It is a great story about how he, similar to Kevin, was diagnosed just before a big hockey tournament, and he asked his doctor if he could go play, and he said, as long as you manage your diabetes and you come back after your game and just take proper care, sure, you can go play, and nothing can stop him. So if you're interested in checking out this book, it is available for purchase online on our website at www.diabeteshopefoundation.com under resources. It's a really fun book for kids to read, to be empowered, inspired. It's fun, it's colorful, and who doesn't love hockey? It can't really get more Canadian than that. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our amazing panelists, Scotia, Kevin, and Ali. I learned a lot about sports tonight and diabetes, and I really hope that everyone watching will reach out to you guys too for extra support. And again, that's really why we're here. So with that, thank you again. Join us next week. We will be starting a 4-part transition series talking about a few different things. Next week, we're going to be talking about the workplace and transitioning to the workplace, especially during COVID now. So stay tuned for that next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. And until then, we will see you all next week. Thank you all for joining us, and have a lovely evening. Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.